Hey everybody, happy Monday. In my case, it's 420. I don't know when I'm going to put this video out, but it's definitely not a Monday where you are, uh, where I am. Yeah, as you can tell, I've been celebrating. So, how's it going? I'm just seeing how you're doing. I have been pretty space cadet right now. Okay, so let's get let's get into it. So, I have nothing planned. I just figured that I would be silly today and just have fun listening to me rant and rave about probably ice cream sandwiches again. I don't know, probably something food related, considering the circumstances. But instead, I am really just struggling to get up my energy and to have something to say to you. So who knows how long this is going to go on for before we either just call it quits, which I try not to do. I usually like to keep it in. That's right. That's what my catchphrase is. I remember now. I'm just kidding. I remembered. It was just kind of to add to the bit, that I'm doing a. If you haven't figured it out already, I'm doing a high character. All right, I thought it would be funnier, and instead it's just dead air. So I'm gonna have to abandon that. It was worth a shot. Again, this is an experiment in progress, people. I don't know. I honestly don't know where it's going. I just love the fact that it's fun to do. Nobody's really watching, so it's just kind of like whatever. I'll just say what I want to say and not worry about getting banned or canceled because from what. So it's just been fun. So yeah. Oh well. Stoner Nick character doesn't work out. You move on. Maybe I could have written a couple of one-liners for him. Um, it's just obviously off the cuff. I'm not as funny as. I guess I was comparing myself to the SNL sketch. I can't remember what year that might have been, but it was like the Stoner trivia show, and the ultimate question at the end of the episode was, "What were we just talking about?" And I thought that was hilarious. Like, so we didn't quite get it there, but it is what it is. So yeah, works work. I usually don't talk about it on the cast just because. Well, I mean, first of all, who wants to hear about it? It's just a job's a job. In this case, it's one that I'm doing to get a paycheck. I like the people, I like the work, but it's something that I wouldn't say that I would have done for free, and that would be awesome if I could get to a place where I'm getting paid to do something that I would easily do for free, something like this. But I'm not gonna get paid for this anytime soon, so I'm thinking along more lines of just producing something other than content. I'd love to be able to make something that might still be in the world after I'm gone. That would be kind of cool. This obviously might be. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how digital stuff is going to go as time goes on. I don't know if any of you out there have ever read the Foundation series, but it's like if Earth is able to, humanity is able to live long enough to, you know, basically live so long that if you're try to find like live so long and live off planets for so long that if you're going to try to find any information even on the Earth itself, spoilers by the way for a series that's been out for probably longer than I've lived, um, it's going to be very hard. Like yeah, it was recorded, but eventually, like the storage devices, data gets corrupted. It turns into unusable stuff. So to the point where it takes some like really backwoods, you know, uh, people to even like have a false god named Earth, and it actually came from the fact that there were people that were living on the planet Earth at one point, and now people have gone off to the stars, and it's just been so many generations that even our origin story ultimately gets lost. And that's kind of how we are right now. I mean, scientists are discovering, some of the basics about what's happened, but even in my lifetime, it's just like, oh, we completely screwed up when the actual, Bronze Era might have been, and oh, we didn't evolve from them, but we might have some ancestors might have f them, and then that now we are actually some half siblings from them. they're learning new stuff every day about Origin, but there was basically nobody there smart enough to record it. So I'm just saying, like, starting now, if you're going to start recording now, and then made sure that every generation from then made sure to be faithful to keeping that on record somewhere somehow. It's kind of like how we find old reels and salt mines of old movies, and then you can get some of the footage that was originally cut out of the original film, but it was still stored somewhere. And so that would have been the plan, but in reality, it's probably going to be, well, after years, well, this one kid that didn't reinvent the light bulb that you know hopefully did more good than bad in his life, did a little podcast. And like at what point, 85 generations down the road, does the faithful historian be like, oh shoot, the data's corrupted and I don't really have time to go look at the backup? you know so what's cool is that useful and um, you know useful and hardy stuff, like like an antique, chair, or something like. That's a horrible example, but at the same time, it's like that's the kind of stuff that's like family heirlooms, and oh, that looks cool and rustic and Adirondack, and I must have it, and it it's crazy to think that some of these old chairs that that either you sit in or you just have for decoration or whatever. It's weird to have a functional item as a decoration, kind of like having those. I remember that. I don't know if that's still a thing, but trucks that are lowered, so that basically you would never be able to put anything into the back end of the truck. So it's just a stylized, modded out truck that you can never use as its intended purpose as a truck. So that to me is always weird, where you buy something that is a functional old thing and you do it for the aesthetics. And in some cases, I guess it makes sense. I mean, obviously, you want to have, like, like if there was the if Jesus was a carpenter, and he did build a chair. If there's the Jesus chair, yeah, obviously it's old enough that it would just crumble to dust if you sat in it. You don't want to sit in it. That there's exceptions to prove the rule. I'm just saying that I don't know about. Uh, we should all leave a legacy. Ideally with one, two, three kids tops. Sorry, I just got political real quick, but it's just the people that have 20 kids. It's like, what are you doing? Um, I do see merit in keeping the DNA line. I mean, that's biology, that's nature, that just makes sense. That's existential crisis, that's midlife, and that's realizing, oh my God, how am I gonna live forever, because I can't. It's physically impossible. We're working on it, and if we ever do get there, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think you'd want to get immortal, as it were? I mean, there's probably no way to ever go 100% fully immortal, unless, like, we're talking, you can literally download your consciousness into backup disks that are um, connected to a network of multiple planets. So if there was ever a galaxy ending event, you could still, like, download to the other galaxy. And even then, is it still you? I mean, just like how if you transport on a transporter in Star Trek, I mean, didn't technically the transporter? Sorry, this is gonna get dark. If you love everything about Star Trek, please turn this off right now, because I'm going to get into the fact where it's like, the science of it is not that they are taking your atoms, breaking them apart bit by bit, shooting them across space, and then reassembling them together. Because that simple act in of itself would actually probably kill you. So when you get beamed to another place, well, that's literally the transporter making a copy of you, all of your experiences up until then in your brain synapses, going across, basically sending a signal, not the particles, but the signal to the other side, and then taking elements, much like a replicator does with the food, because they have that technology of the replicator. They just applied it on a grander scale to the humans, and so now they just take whatever atoms are in the environment that is in the other end of the teleporter, and then they just create a new copy you. So literally, the first time in that canon, if you use the teleporter, the very first time, you basically died that day, and ever since then, it's been copies of you that have continued on your work. And I guess you could kind of get into it where if technology like that existed, then you basically would have immortality. I mean, there's nothing that tells you that you have to have the teleporter rebuild your cells with the same. There's a timestamp in your cells. I'm not gonna get too into it because I don't know the exact terminology and stuff. But like every time your cell replicates itself, there is like this like little gene that is like a kind of a timestamp thing, and so you actually have it in your genetics that you have an end date. And there are certain species that don't have that. For instance, lobsters, but they have their own way of eventually dying of old age because they have the unfortunate thing of having the exoskeleton. And the bigger and bigger and older they get, the harder it is to crawl out of the exoskeleton when it's another shed time. And so eventually they either can't get out of it, and so, some like infection happens between the two shells and they die, or they're at their most vulnerable whenever they're changing out their shell. So this is finally the day that they get, picked off on by the predator because they just took forever to get out of that shell. I mean, no matter what, eventually you're going to pass. And so if the teleporter technology existed, then yeah, as long as you're okay with killing, the version of yourself, I don't see any reason why they couldn't download the brain synapses content at least as much as you can. I mean, I'm sure there's a finite amount of knowledge that you can maintain in a head. You can always learn those tactics, like the Mind Palace from like the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes series. That's a real thing. Like, we have a much, not me, but most people have a much more visual memory um, than they do the traditional way. So if you can visualize it and you have like, a constant place that you go back to in your head that you always visualize, then you can, it's not 100% accurate, but you could actually get pretty close to a photographic memory. But you would have to go through that process every time of making a new memory. It's like if this is something I need to commit to memory, I need to go into my mind palace. In this case, it was a palace. I mean, it could be a house, it could be a shed. But basically, you visualize, putting it in a spot, and so ideally, in that way, the important memories that you have would never technically ever fully go away. You could always reaccess them unless you had something happen to you, you know, um, mental wise, either brain trauma or Alzheimer's or any of the other horrible things that I don't know which is worse, death or having that happen to you first. I'll be honest. I'm gonna get real for a sec, but that's one thing that I really. I mean, I don't see how anyone's number one fear can't be death. I mean, I know that it's inevitable, so some people just have learned to accept that. I don't know how to accept that. But I mean, obviously, that's the thing to be most scared of. Premature or just eventual. Apparently, public speaking ranks above death, which is insane because obviously, I have no problems just filling an hour with you, letting some personal stuff slip out, and knowing that this could, if for some reason one of my videos goes viral, like God forbid if I get home invaded and I you know get through it and then I post it online, and then not only do my close friends and family are like, what, what happened, and if I tell them just watch the podcast, I don't want to talk about it anymore, and then that blows up, and then just the natural nature of humanity where it's like, what happened, like it could happen to me, like let's watch this, and then they oh, I do have a dog, and they start revisiting some of my other videos. There's a way that I could go viral and blow up, but you know it's scary thinking about the end, and that there's nothing you can do about it. And eventually, some people, I don't know, take some hallucinogenics, they meditate, they confront their abusive father, something that gives them peace, where they're just like, yeah, like Kevin Smith, one of my favorite people. He had a heart attack, and widowmaker. He should 80% people die that have it, and he was just like, well, this could be it, and if it is, well, I had a good life, and I'm ready. I guess I don't want to by any means, but if it does happen, then yeah, man. Not many people can say that they had quite the trajectory of a life that I did. And the more I think about life, the more I think, well, isn't that kind of the end goal? Is that if you have a near death or death experience, that one of your final thoughts is, hey man, I wish I could have done more, but the amount that I accomplished, I'm not ashamed of. So whatever comes next, bring it on. Getting heavy, getting heavy today. I don't know. I mean, that's something that is always on my mind. It just blows my mind that it isn't on others. It's to think the mentality of, well, if I die and then that's it, well then I'm not gonna know. So why should I worry about that? That's the scariest version to me. I mean, obviously that's why, um, there's so many different religions. I'm not gonna get into an argument of which one's right. I mean, just the fact that so many exist, it's just like because at one point somebody thought, um, I don't want there to be an end because then in a way, what was all the point of accruing all of this knowledge? Especially if you weren't able to pass it, most of that on to somebody else. If you weren't able to get it logged into a book that actual people read, if you weren't able to pass it on to a kid that remembered some of it, it's like, what was the point of me accruing all of that so that I could then forget it? I think that's the tragedy. I mean, maybe the more I think about it and say it out loud, it's like maybe that's the tragedy. Is like, yeah, yeah, narcissism, ennui, um, selfishness. I don't want what I'm experiencing to end. Some of it's actually kind of fun. Some of it's very intriguing. Some of it's a pain in the ass, but I'd almost be suspicious if it was all just good all the time. And it drives me nuts that people that live in a bubble for long enough don't willingly, subject themselves to some of the not so savory parts just so they can fully appreciate what they go through more. Some do in certain aspects, like for instance, you know, Joe Rogan. Shout out to Joe Rogan. He, um, you know, slowly over the years, it seems like, the more informed he gets, actually the more like removed from what some people are dealing with, and so it's funny that like his experience of like oh yeah, now I appreciate the little things so much better is like if he goes on a hunting trip and he's cold and wet and miserable for days on end, and that's admirable. That's definitely I see where he's coming from, but it's also the same as like um, commenting on all of the tents in L.A. You know, he had the means to move out and be in Texas. Like I don't know, maybe choosing to live in the tenant situation for a little bit. Because I know that not every one of them is choosing to be there. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. It's just it's weird where I mean I'm losing the thread, but yeah, definitely when you lose touch, and I feel like I lose touch every day. I mean, especially now with the new job, like retail is has probably caused almost as I hate to say it like this, but it almost feels like if you combine like the 1 year overseas that I did with the 10 years of retail that I did, I almost feel like I have close to the same amount of PTSD from both. I mean, yeah, 10 years over time. I mean, but it's still it takes something out of you. Like you definitely notice, I mean, if I'm on Rogan, might as well just continue with that. It's just like he talks about, like it's like you have a mountain of marbles, and every day the people that you're surrounded with, just take like two marbles out. It's like, well, you can't get mad at two marbles. It's just two marbles. You have a mountain of them. But eventually you notice that mountain turn into a hill and getting smaller. That's definitely how, I felt like retail was in some small areas. Some of it you could just kind of shake off. Unfortunately, most of it I ended up just, like, reducing the stress by, smoking cigarettes, which, is definitely not the way to do it. It seems like if you're going to try and get rid of stress, it's like stress is bad for your health. It's going to affect your blood pressure. It's going to affect a lot of things. But it almost seems like some of the easiest ways to try to get rid of the stress is by harming your body in a different way. And sometimes that's even true for the positive things. Like sometimes where you can get rid of stress is by doing exercise, and then maybe you're the kind of personality that like well, I can only get that release out of it if I push myself, past the point of what I should have done, and now, I have injuries and stuff. It's and that's even a bad example because it's actually really, really hard to have stress be replaced by a positive thing because that actually requires focus, dedication, sticking to it. Sticking to it like I do with this podcast. Where right now it's kind of painful. Where it's just like, oh, that opening, I almost kind of want to just turn it off and turn it back on again. Oh my god, I'm not even halfway through. Like, am I even going to be able to get all the way through this? But it's something that I do enjoy. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like there's always going to be two sides to a coin when you do stuff like that. Where yeah, there's going to be points where it's painful, otherwise it's not worth doing. But at the end of the day, it's like, don't you just ultimately enjoy doing this? Like, don't you enjoy just I don't know. It's almost like a therapy session where it's one of those therapists that like from something about Mary, where he technically left and ate lunch while he was doing his therapy session. He was literally just ranting at less than a camera, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm ranting at a camera. That's actually, Ben Stiller's character was doing even less than that. Like there wasn't even a recording device in the room, as far as I know. It was literally him just talking to what he thought was a filled chair, and it was a guy just trying to enjoy his lunch, which he didn't apparently give himself room for. So that's on him doubly now that I think about it. So how about that? Yeah, think about old movies. I know a lot of people during this past year, um, during some of the months that they had nothing to do, definitely went back and rewatched some old movies. And man, it's a trip down memory lane. And it's tough, especially when you start getting kind of an eye for it, where you realize not the best made movie. This is actually kind of a shit movie. Pardon my French, but I gotta stop using that phrase, by the way. Like, pardon my French, it's just like, sorry for cussing, is what I really should say. It's just like, pardon my French, that's, one of those things where, you grew up as a kid and doing this on somebody's, arm was called an Indian burn. It's just all of this stuff where it's like, it was completely 100% harmless. It isn't like, it's because I did Indian burns on another kid that I thought about Indians as a negative, and if I ever met somebody that was Indian slash Native American slash indigenous, like that's how far we've evolved. Is like, first of all, not calling them the same thing that we call people from actually India. First of all, but also it's just like yeah, kids are impressionable, and so while I didn't ever consciously think of doing the twisty on somebody's arm as an Indian burn, I also didn't give it a second thought. So when you start getting into that kind of thing, it's like, you know, um, oh, you know what? Fine. Let's just go through all of my childhood stuff. Like the more I go through my own childhood stuff, the less people can try and bring up later on. So like when I grew up, I knew about the Indian burn. So that's taking the arm of the skin, doing that. I know about the Puerto Rican sweep, and so that was when if you're in the lane that's the fast lane, and then all of a sudden your exit's coming up and you weren't paying attention, that you just like basically cut through all the lanes, at once instead of lane pause lane pause lane pause. That was a Puerto Rican sweep, and I'm pretty sure I'm like mostly Portuguese, so clearly I had no animosity towards anything Porto anything like because as a kid I wouldn't have known that it was between Puerto Rican and Portuguese. So it was just it's one of those things where like even though you weren't feeling any animosity because of using those phrases so haphazardly, at the same time you didn't think twice about using phrases like that haphazardly. So at one point, like what if you get to the point where you're using the phrase nigger knife for a broken bottle? You know, like at at some point you're gonna like just freaking wake up and realize, oh shit, I'm racist. A little bit like no, I don't genuinely see a black person and then think oh maybe I should clutch my purse a little bit tighter, maybe I should lock the door as he walks by. You're not thinking that consciously, but you're also not like coming down on yourself for using what is ultimately a very stupid phrase. I can't think of any other word besides stupid because it's just like yeah, when you're a kid you are stupid, you're young, dumb, and full of but I, I said, for common sense, all right, we're gonna move past it, But anyway, so some of the stuff that you realize as you get older, it's insane. So I feel like I'm growing, not at the pace that I would have liked to have been if I pictured myself at this age and then was just like, looked back at one of my past selves and was just like, hey, past me, it's future me. Where do you think you should be? Hey, I'm Ryman. Did you know that you're maybe gonna be a rhymer when you grow up? Anyway, besides bit Ryman, what would you like to have hoped that I would accomplish? And young me obviously was weird, and it would have been like, well, I have to ask because of where I'm at right now. Young me, is world domination still a thing? Like, world domination, is that still like on the table, off the table? And the older me would have had to be like, no, sorry, that was just something fun to joke about, and that I did briefly consider for seriousness for a few seconds. But no, we're not going to world dominate. We haven't yet, and we definitely don't plan to be. In fact, we kind of hate most of responsibility. We just kind of like, effing around and still talking real stuff, but by far not being the one that has the stamp. I guess you could say. So no world domination on the table. Sorry, if that disappoints. And it's just like young me, hopefully would be like, no, it's cool. Again, I was just doing it for funsies, but I just always thought like, what if I did get, you know, really serious about it? If I would have been able to accomplish it, and older me probably would have said, hell yeah. If you started, at the age that you are now, and like sacrificed every other joy and comfort in your life, then yeah, it could happen. But I mean, you have to be that certain type of psycho to devote yourself 100 and no, just 100%. Like you sacrifice your health, you sacrifice your social life, you sacrifice knowledge in other areas. That's why I love being a jack of all trades. Is I might not know everything about dog training, but definitely know a lot, and that's fun. But since I didn't devote my life to it, I also know, a little bit about other pets, and that's great. And since I didn't devote my entire life to figuring out every single little aspect about other pets, I don't have a vet's student debt, and I know a little bit about a bunch of other fun stuff. So I definitely feel like there's so much in the world to soak in that if you put your sole focus on one thing, I mean, and if you get to be the number one in it, that's awesome. Good for you. Like I will pat you on the back and um, join your parade and all that stuff. It's just like yeah, you deserve a celebration. You deserve your own day of the year. I mean, whatever. But I think that at least in this iteration of my existence, that I was meant to try and soak up a little bit of everything. And maybe so that's where, if reincarnation is the thing, maybe whatever part sticks around for the next section will be like, hey, you sampled a little bit of all those things. How about this one? You be fully focused on that one thing that you really liked, but unfortunately discovered too late in life, so that physically you weren't able to, or mentally you weren't able to. But yeah, I definitely think that there is just so much fun to be had in the world that. Oh, Jesus, what was that? Sorry. Some big damn bird. Like, I'd almost say vulture size, or maybe it was a trick of the shadows, but something just came flying off of what looked like was probably the roof into probably the road where there may or may not be something. So that was just kind of very distracting. Speaking of that, like I was driving to work the other day. So all right, there's two driving to work things to tell you about, but one of them was I was driving to work, and this all happened in the same trip. So first, somebody swerved into my lane, And then when I gave them the glare as they drove past, I saw that they had been texting on their phone. Then I had to pass, and this kind of sucks, but I had to swerve to avoid a cat in the middle of the road that somebody else had hit and was absolutely dead. There was no point in stopping just to check in on it. If it was a cat lying in the middle of the road and it was not obvious that it was dead, I obviously would have stopped. But in this case, it was just something to also swerve to avoid and then depress me. And then, same trip, not lying, there was a white dog, maybe a retriever, whitish dog. So maybe it was. Anyway, so it was a dog that clearly had was not electronically fenced, had crossed the street to go investigate whatever, and then cut in front of me as they were making their way back to their house. And I didn't have I'd have to swerve for all three of these, but like I definitely had to correct, either slow down, um, and or do something. And so that sucked. Like by the end of that trip, like all three of those happened on the same trip. By the end of it, I was white knuckling, and I was at the point where I was looking for a bouncing ball, knowing that there was going to be a kid behind it, because that was the point that I was at with that day. I mean, that day, that drive, that 30-minute drive. I had already experienced those three things in succession. So it was funny because then it was a few days later, but I was driving, and it was pretty early in the morning, but I was still surprised. A owl almost face planted on my windshield. An owl swooped down and low and in front of my vehicle as I was driving. Got really close to clipping one of its wings, but instead of being like and back into stress mode like I was getting in that previous driving incident, I was just blown away by like, oh my god, I get to see an owl. How majestic, how beautiful. I was barely thinking about the almost hitting it because it was just like, yeah, first thing that would happen is maybe the windshield gets cracked. Like, after the day I had driving the other day, if I almost hit an owl, I mean, I'm just happy for the experience. This is the point that I had gotten to. Oh man, so yeah, that was something cool that happened to me. Not much happens to me in a given day that I care to share that I feel like you would even want to hear, but that is definitely one that was pretty neat after the three almost hitting things. That one was one where it was just like, cool, man, cool. You do you, owl. I don't know if you ever saw that, but it was a really cool. That was a really cool video that owls make no sound, or if it is, it's almost undetectable. Owls make no sound when they flap their wings. So if you think about it, even a hummingbird, like one of the smallest things you could possibly consider a bird, makes the noise. And so, I mean, we're not even going to talk about birds that make a noise from their throat as they fly, because there's some that are, but there's a very audible flap for most any animal except for the owl. For some reason, they managed to evolve in a way where those wings are just dead silent to a microphone. I thought that was so fascinating about them. I mean, those dudes are more vicious than you might lead on. You just think they're just the peaceful whoo whoo. No, they'll mess somebody's day up. But you know, maybe that's why I love them even more. I do love some nature's metal in my life, but that is definitely one thing that I thought was super cool. Where it was just like they got the wings figured out. Like if birds were people, owls would have patented that wing stuff, and it would have been like Disney, and they would have actually extended that patent past the allotted 50 years. Which is something that I'm pissed about. It's just like there's a reason why stuff's supposed to go into public domain. You should be able to have that now become a piece of the world that other people can use without having to pay royalties. And so Disney is just quickly becoming. I didn't know if eventually we were just going to be instead of humans, we're going to be Google's, but now it's almost looking like we're going to be Disney's. I don't know. Like there's there's such a thing as a monopoly, and that's supposed to be illegal. And for some reason, the laws haven't seemed to catch up with the fact that in a certain area, you might only be able to get Comcast or satellite, and that's monopoly. and there is absolutely no um, legal consequences for them. And I feel digitally there's a lot of that going on. Um, at what point, if Disney keeps, securing the rights for every little thing, I mean, once they get, DC and a couple other things, if they own the rights to it all, that's a monopoly. But are you seriously going to say that they're going to then be on trial? I mean, at that point, wouldn't they just, like not take the rights for, all the crappiest stuff that they could? I mean, I don't know where this is headed, but I don't definitely don't like the direction that it is. I don't think that much like countries and rulers and all that other stuff. I don't think that there should be too much power in one. It's not how we were designed to be. Like you very, um, like here's just an example of like why we're kind of built broken, um, through necessity. So you do realize that one of the main reasons why back in the day when we were going through the dark ages and wars and all this stuff where if you today were to live through it you would probably make it a month before you killed yourself because like why would I want to deal with this is eventually going to end in heartbreak anyway, and even if it doesn't, even if I'm like one of those few lucky people that managed to survive and live to be 100, I have those memories for the rest of my life. No thank you. Waking terrors. I mean, Wolverine is the scariest person in the world to sleep with because he has the claws that he jams in the pillow next to him, because apparently, his PTSD is very specific against any potential lover he might have at the time. So why, nowadays most people would just be like, why would I want to, even if I survive this, live with those memories? I'll just kill myself. I mean, that's such the easier way to do it. Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we have built into us that if you are exposed to enough death and tragedy, it's built into you that you get numb to it, that you get unfazed by it. And what sucks is that that might have been necessary when humanity was going through the hardest times. Like there's an not really talked about that much, like event that one point in our history that it's just like yeah we were like really populated, kind of like not quite to the degree that we are now, obviously, but we were pretty abundant. And then there was this one incident that dropped us down to the tens of thousands, which as a species is not really that great. I think that we were actually dropped down to a point where we would have put ourselves in the endangered list. And that's kind of crazy scary that that's something that happened that, most people don't talk about. I don't know if it's because we don't care about history because it was so long ago that nobody actually knows exactly what happened, or if that's something that's just like, oh, no, let's not talk about that. We're going to live forever. Yeah, right, humans? Yeah, go humans. We're going to live forever. Um, but that very much was a thing. And, we bounced back from that. But can you imagine if you had gotten down to the point where it's just like, I haven't seen another person in about a year. Like back then, like if it was that sparse, there's probably little pockets where it was just like, you probably would have had to like, wander for a year or two before you happened to accidentally bump into the person that was wandering aimlessly as well. I mean, anybody of today's era, like, after like, the first 2 months probably would just be like, what is the point if there's literally nobody else? I mean, what am I gonna do here? Just wait until I get so old and frail enough that I can't hunt my food anymore and I either die of starvation or worse, I get eaten. I mean, no, starvation's worse than getting eaten. I'd rather have a quick death, depending on what's eating you. I mean, I think a bear will maul you to death, whereas like most of the you know cat species will go for a quick kill, turn you into ragdoll faster rather than later or something. So I don't know, but yeah, crazy stuff. In honor of 420 and the fact that this has gone so off the rails that I don't even know if I want to use it, I might just leave you a little early this time. I usually try and make it to the 1 hour mark or thereabouts, but I know that I'm probably honing in on maybe the 45-minute mark. But at this point, I'm just thinking that I could either continue talking and bury myself further into a hole of really deep dark stuff, or I can just kind of what do you call it? Take the mulligan or whatever, and just say that you know, hope you had a good weekend. Hope your Monday didn't suck too bad because you're probably mostly through it because I usually post these after I get off of work. So there's a likely chance that you're going to see this either the day after or, at the very least after dinner probably. So, you know, I definitely hope, the best for your weekend and the beginning of your next week. For those of you that are grinding it out like I am, just think of it like a RPG where you're just getting XP for D. I don't know. I just I just realized I did a lot of E sounds. Um, yeah, sometimes when it feels like you're just grinding it, just keep in mind that even some of the most fun games that you've ever played, you have to do some repetitive stuff in order to get to the level where you can then move on to the next step. And you might not see it coming. You might actually do it. I mean, in a way, I did it. It took pandemic and a company that I worked for showing the true colors after almost a decade of working for them before I got to my next level in my RPG. But maybe those 10 plus years were of grinding literally to give me XP in order to be able to do this cast and talk to you about the various animal stuff until I can figure out where this is really going that I can do for the rest of my life. Because obviously I'm eventually going to run out of stuff to talk about with the different pets unless I actually take the time to learn more, which at the moment who has the time. But you know having said that, I mean I feel like until I'm dead I'm always going to have something to say, just about what I don't know. Like, let's figure out what you the audience and what me the producer want to talk about. But I feel like that there's definitely places it could go, and once I run out of the other ones, hopefully I'll have an idea in mind by then. But in the meantime, these ones are kind of fun because it's just interesting to see. Sometimes I actually prefer the ones where I don't know at all where it's going to go. Like, to the point where I'm getting really bad about having the non-sponsor endorsements because I literally didn't even plan that far out enough, like, to have a book or a cribbage board, in front of me. I mean, I did briefly, glance at the pillow, from Josh, at Sand Dune Customs, but, beyond that, it's like I'm just trying to do some free flow, you know, thought, and so it's gonna, and I say this on almost every one of them, but it's just, I'm gonna have to keep flexing this muscle until it gets toned. So I appreciate you. Like, who would ever want to watch? Like, let's put it this way, like, let's pretend that this is me getting into shape, because in a way I am. I mean, I'm flexing my being able to just blab for half an hour to an hour on a specific or non-specific subject because that's the muscle that you need to flex if you're going to become a regular podcaster. So I've flicked my wrist to try and get rid of the ums and uhs, and that quickly turned painful, annoying, and didn't work. So I just kind of abandoned it. But you know, why would you want to watch somebody's workout video when they are in the beginning stages where they have horrible form and they are sweating and dropping the weights after only like 5 reps? It's that's kind of what this is you're basically watching me as a husky boy, just now signing up to the gym and going on a bench and using it with the completely wrong limb that it was meant to be used for. And I do appreciate all of the other regular members of the gym that have come over and spotted me. You guys rock. Josh especially. And that's something that means a lot. And yeah, it could be potentially a lifesaver in the case of the people at the gym that see a newbie, kind of keep an eye on him while they're working out, and as soon as he puts too much weight up and then he's choking himself, they run over and they help. People like you are the salt of the earth, and I'm gonna end on that. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you watching, some of you, and like and subscribe because apparently it's important. And yeah, happy belated 420.